Howdy, howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast number 335. With all that was going on in a lot of the U.S.'s past week when it comes to weather, I'm really grateful for all those of you who reached out. Some were wondering what it was like here in the Bitterroots, Sapphire Mountains to be exact, where I am. It was pretty calm and quiet, actually. We only got maybe a total of maybe three quarters of an inch. Nothing like our old residents in the Eastern Sierra, which in real terms got basically a normal winter. We always used to look for the March miracle there in California. Well, came a couple of weeks early, but it really dumped. It's a good thing. We need that water. It needs to take time, though, and percolate down. So trust Mother Nature to do her best for us, and then we have to do our best with the blessings that we have been presented. But I do appreciate you guys reaching out and checking on us. We're all good. Maggie, having a great time out there in that snow, what's left of it. Wanted to thank you for sponsoring the Moose Podcast as well. Bedford's Camera, bedfords.com. You folks are really you're over the top in helping myself as well as all of you who call and reach out. You know, you get that Moose discount, that 5% when you check out. And it's the minimal thing that you get from Bedford's. No, they provide us great service and product and education. We've got me. Yeah, I'm coming up at the end of the month there in Arkansas. We're going to be doing aviation, man. It's going to be really great. Hope you can join us. And remember, head to bedfords.com, whether you do it by web or by phone or in person. These guys are the best. So thank you, bedfords.com. Want to get into this week's podcast, and I have to be honest with you. It stems again from another email, actually one and a half, I must say, because one email was all about this topic. One was in part, and that's about exposure, the price of exposure. Now, you might think I'm going to be talking about f-stops and shutter speed and light, which I would love to, but no, this time I'm going to talk about that one thing that seems to be dangled out in front of photographers quite a bit, and that is the payment for your goods with exposure. Exposure. Now, a little background. Back in the day, we'd shoot film. And when you got that one image that you loved, it was literally that one image. You could make dupes. I made it was very expensive, especially back then, but you could make 4x5 dupes, which were about the same quality as the original slide. And that way you could keep the original in your file safe and sound. You could send out those dupes and not worry about that gorilla in the separations scratching it. But that wasn't always not always practical, and you didn't always have a dupe of the image you wanted to send out. So with that in mind, and the delivery memo was saying that, if you scratch that slide, it's going to cost you $1,500 in damages. Sending out photographs, being promised no more of a payday than exposure, yeah, it got to be really like just a four-letter word when people said, we're going to pay you with exposure. Now, what is that? Pay with exposure, what does that mean? Well, in general terms, it means they're going to use your photograph and whatever they're going to do, be it print or a book or advertising, whatever. And somehow, some way, the person looking at this photograph, your photograph in these mediums, and they're going to say, oh, I love that photograph. And they're going to search through all that stuff your photograph is with, find your name, and then find you and call you, and you're going to make money that way from that exposure. Here's the problem. Here's a problem here, okay? If we were to fast forward to today, we are hoping that when someone looks at that photograph of ours and they see that name, your name with that picture, that they're going to go out and find you, usually via the internet, because the old days of phone books and operators are long gone. And then they're going to reach out and they're going to, again, give you money for that thing they saw. And yes, this does happen. I mean, there's, my favorite story comes way back from the very, very original Iron Man and the NASA Assembly Building, that a picture a guy took and by accident just happened to take a high res, and just by accident, art director, assistant saw it and on the web, and he got a nice payday. Those things do happen. Can't really do a business plan around that. And it's really hard to understand and to learn from the process from something like that. But it does happen. Now, why am I doing a whole podcast on the price of exposure? Well, going back to the old days, it was, I was, it was, I was adamant that I was not going to give, because that you're doing, even away for free, my photograph for just exposure. The first issue is that if you give it away for free, and there had been a number of court cases way back in the 60s and 70s, early 80s, that if you give your image away for free, then it has no value. And if it has no value, how can you sue for copyright because you gave it away for free? That's kind of, our court system, and that's the laws, which haven't really been updated or changed. So right off the bat, if you give your image away for free for payment of exposure, which can't be monetized or noted or documented, then right there's that first issue. The next, kind of a big one, is you've put money into the creation of that photograph. Now, you didn't go out just to take one picture. At least most photographers don't. They took a whole bunch, right? And this is one in that whole bunch. But still, when it comes to business, that photograph, you're not going to sell the whole bunch from that shoot. You're going to sell a couple or one. That's how you figure out the price that you have into it, and then you do that tax business thing. Well, not getting your money back, let alone making money when you do for exposure. And then you had the risk that your slide would be destroyed, and then you'd be out of business completely because it's a slide. Once it's destroyed, it's destroyed. And especially back then, we didn't know that in 2020 you could take your image and with the magic of AI, take that scan and make it all better, and all the dust and scratches and oil blotches and everything else that happens goes away. So exposure got a real black eye. Then we're going to speed up the clock. Early 2000s, I was into digital. And digital, one of the things that digital did, for at least for me, and then for all our clients we work with, that $1,500 clause that if you damaged our image, that went away. Because it's digital, right? You just click copy and you've got another original. Yeah, it's a copy, but it's still is an original digital file. And when you send it off to a client, you still got it in your files. You didn't send off that one and only slide. So that clause went away. And with it, had to start changing your thinking, the price of exposure. So early 2000s, I got into aviation photography, and right off the bat, as my life tends to bless me more often than not, I met a very influential, very smart person right off the bat. And Bob, he was an amazing guy. And one of the things that he passed along as he mentored me in the beginning of my aviation was that he had some amazing planes. Super Corsair, for example, and he was very adamant that he was only the custodian of that plane at the moment. It belonged to history. It belonged to the aviation world, and he was just the current custodian. He never thought he owned the plane, though legally he owned the plane. But and it's and his that was his kind of general philosophy. And then it came to images, and I still had my I don't give away my images attitude when I came up to Bob. And he quickly changed that whole dynamic for me with a number of discussions, what we talked about. So then actually giving my digital file to someone, right? And then of course I still have the original, I have a copy. Got to be a little bit more of a norm. What's this got to do with the price of exposure? Well, how did that change the dynamics and how did that change the way I answer the question about giving images away for exposure? And that's kind of the heart of the questions that got in the emails. So, in this day and age, and as you know, if you listen to the podcast, this whole branding and people are going to find you on the web, it don't work that way. It does on occasion, but it's not enough for business plan. And it's really not enough to even pay the rent from all the stories I've told and hear. And from our own personal experience, we know how, I'm going to say, little business comes from photographs seen on the web. But this is not a business class. But anyway, the idea is that your image is going to be out there in social media somewhere, and then somebody's going to see it. They're going to click on it, and then they're going to click again and get to you, click again to make a sale. And it does happen. Okay. So I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying that the price of exposure is something you have to think about in your own personal life. When you have someone come up and says, "Hey, I can't pay you, but you'll get good exposure." You can't use the old norms to make the call and say, "Nope, I'm not going to do it for just exposure." There are many things out there where that need our help. Mm, First thing I think of is wildlife, right? Critters, habitat. And some of the best photographs are taken by folks who are not in the business. You see these single images out there. If you saw the winners, for example, God, it seems like there's winners every day anymore. Come think about it, though. Contests are big. Contests are big. I don't know. I've never been a contest person. I was in high school and not since, but there's some really beautiful images out there. And I did a quick little look at some of the contest winners in the last 5 years at the images and then how they actually got out into the mainstream, either were put in magazines or on walls of museums. And yeah, crickets. So that exposure, right? What is the price? You have to think about the fact that if it's a cause that is near and dear to your heart, and if someone says, "Hey, I don't have any money, but I'll give you exposure," instead of thinking about how you yourself and your photography will get exposed, but perhaps how the subject and the story you're trying to tell will get exposure, it might just make a difference. And that's really the point of this whole podcast, is making the difference with your photographs. The avenues in which we have to share, if you haven't noticed, are getting smaller and smaller. And even the ones we have are getting more confined and constricted. It's like almost suffocating. So if someone has the imagination and the wherewithal and the means in which to take your photograph, which is your story, and put it out in front of more people than perhaps you're able to do, or these restrictive medias we're facing can do, then perhaps the price of exposure is incalculable. Perhaps the price is so high you can't not say, "I'm in." If you're going to be true to your craft and true to your photography, isn't it all about writing with light? And writing with light is only going to be worth anything if somebody will read what you've written. That means you've got to have eyes on that photograph. So the price of exposure, it is completely, I think, flipped around with the way the world is moving. Now, I'm not about to say or do give away my entire library on the hope somebody's going to put it out there. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. You're going to have to do that one thing that I know people hate to do, and it really hurts, but you're going to have to think. You're going to have to think for a minute. What's the story in this photograph? What audience do I want to see this story? How do I want to move that audience? Is this offer that's just been put in front of me going to fulfill everything that went into that click to do justice to my photograph and to honor my story in the subject? If the answer is it is, then I don't see how you can not give your photograph away for free for exposure. And yes, I say free has no value. But that's not a blanket for everything. Again, if you can get more eyes on that photograph, is that really, really what we want? So you got to keep in mind and put it all in perspective, folks. Okay, the price of exposure could be priceless. You guys have a marvelous, marvelous week. And remember to make every click your story.